Greetings folks and welcome to the Electromaker show. This is your roundup of all things Maker and embedded and lovely, this time with the bonus lake sounds in the background. This week we will be looking at the M5 Dial, which is a development kit from M5 Stack, hidden within a rotary encoder with a touchscreen and a bright display, with NFC capabilities and a battery management system, a number of awesome things. Of course, our in-house gadget guru and engineer Robin Mitchell will be taking you through that. We have a couple of wonderful things from Crowd Supply to look at, and also the release of the PocketBeagle 2 to talk about, which is the very exciting follow-up, unsurprisingly, to the original PocketBeagle. BeagleBone's miniature SBC, not dissimilar to the Raspberry Pi Zero, but very much distinct from it in several ways. So join me on probably the first show that will be interrupted by ducks at some point we've had here at Electromaker. Let's get started. It's time to talk about the PocketBeagle 2, which is the follow-up, unsurprisingly, to the PocketBeagle, the mini version of the BeagleBoard that came out a long while ago, actually. The original's been out for ages. The newer one has a number of upgrades, which we'll get into in just a moment. But for me, it's quite exciting that we have a new version of this board, because to me, BeagleBoard have always been one of the big three names in hobby computing, really. Arduino being the one that kind of stuck the microcontroller side, Raspberry Pi being the one that was the single-board computer side, and BeagleBoard being the other, not only because they've been around for that long, but because it represented the three different ways that you could work with these devices. The Raspberry Pi to me always was a computer that was a thing in and of itself. Yes, you could run them completely headlessly, but you'd plug a keyboard and a mouse into them to get started. With an Arduino, you had the Arduino IDE and you were programming it on a separate computer because it is a microcontroller. But every experience that I've had with BeagleBoard has been to plug that board into the USB port of a computer and program directly on the BeagleBoard, but using a web-based browser. And there may be only subtle differences, but being able to just plug into any USB port and open a browser window was fantastic when I was learning how to use the Bela software, for example, because I could just literally keep the Bela Mini in my pocket, and no matter what computer I was working on at the time, if I had a spare minute or a break, I would plug it in and do a little bit of sound synthesis. And long-time viewers of the show know that's pretty much my obsession when it comes to embedded things. Now, the PocketBeagle had an obvious comparison in the Raspberry Pi Zero, in that they were both slightly lower powered versions of their larger sibling single-board computers, both running Linux. But the PocketBeagle 2 over the PocketBeagle doesn't, on the surface, seem like that big of a change, because you still have a 1 GHz processor, you still have 512 megabytes of RAM. These things on paper don't seem to make that much of a difference, but as it turns out, actually, this is quite a big jump. So I went on to talk about this Hackster article, but the audio was a bit off, so I decided to re-record it. This Hackster article goes into pretty much everything you need to know about it. There's a couple of useful things that PocketBeagle have put out themselves, but the title says it all. It now has a dual Cortex-A53 CPU, and it is now under $30. So you now have a 64-bit processor, and as we're going to see in just a moment as well, there's a couple of other differences, but I would highly recommend going and checking this fantastic article by James Lewis. It takes you through pretty much everything that you would want to know about it, but for just a very quick comparison to the old PocketBeagle, for those who may be familiar with it, this is the product brief, the PDF from BeagleBone, and one of the first things they have here, I keep calling them BeagleBone, it's BeagleBoard. The BeagleBone was one of their early boards. There is a comparison chart right here, which on the surface, like I said, it doesn't look all that different. You still have 512 megabytes of RAM, but the difference is it's now DDR4 RAM. You still have 1 gigahertz CPU, but it's dual 1 gigahertz CPU. A Cortex-A53, which is now 64-bit, instead of the 32-bit side of things. But here's where things start to get quite interesting. Here on the BeagleBoard website, on the PocketBeagle page, you can see that there's the Texas Instruments AM6232, the thing we've just mentioned, the dual 64-bit ARM Cortex-A53 microprocessor, subsystem up to 1 gigahertz, with all the things we've just talked about. However, there's also a single-core ARM Cortex-M4F MCU at up to 400 megahertz, I believe in the same die, I might have that wrong. But a secondary chip on the board, which is a ARM Cortex M0 Plus, which is a separate MCU which is taking care of all of the things like ADC, for example. That is where you're getting your 12-bit ADC from, but it is its own MCU in its own right. So technically you have 4 cores on this board. Another thing to note is that all capes, and cape if you're not familiar is the BeagleBoard version of a shield for Arduino or a hat for Raspberry Pi. All the capes that fit on top of the PocketBeagle 2, the original PocketBeagle, sorry, should be compatible with the PocketBeagle 2. However, one difference here is the change of architecture might mean that there might be a few things here and there in the libraries that need upgrading, simply because the original libraries would have been for 32-bit Linux architecture, and of course the new board is a 64-bit board. So of course I will be linking the official page from BeagleBoard in the description as well, and this is where you can find the rest of the board features. As mentioned, it has 512 megabytes of DDR RAM, which matches the old one, but instead of it being DDR3, it is DDR4. So you're not going to be running any large language models on this thing, but of course that's not really the point, is it? Other things like it has JTAG support and a few user controllable LEDs for feedback. It also has a user/boot button and a couple of other things if you want to know the size of the PCB and weight and all of that stuff as well. But BeagleBoard have been putting out a number of exciting things over the years. If you want to see a couple of different interviews with Jason from BeagleBoard, we spoke to him at Embedded World on a couple of occasions. Once on the launch of their BeagleBoard AI board, I believe was one of them, and the other one was the BeagleBoard Freedom Connect, the single board computer with the separate board as well, both with the micro click board sockets in them. We had interviews about both of those releases. For me personally, this is a quite exciting one, largely because I wonder, does this mean we're going to get a Bela Mini 2? Because that would be awesome. It is time to move on to our product of the week, and today we're talking about the M5 Dial. Now this is from M5 Stack, the company that you're probably familiar with. They put out a bunch of those little ESP32 based development boards that can do a lot of different things. This one is quite special though, because rather than it being a development board with some add-ons that make it do something specific, it's almost in reverse. Because this is a rotary encoder with a touchscreen, which by itself is already kind of a cool thing. I mean, you can probably think of 1,000,001 things that you could do with that. But inside the body of it is an ESP32 S3. This is essentially a development kit, but with a very specific sort of use case in mind, however made to be as wide of a use case as possible for something in this form factor. Now I may not have explained that as well as I possibly could, but Robin Mitchell thankfully is here to do that for us. He is our in-house gadget guru, and he is actually an engineer rather than just an enthusiast like I am. He'll be able to explain it to you in a way that I could probably not quite manage. And if you'd like to find that, there's a link in the description to his Electromaker video on it. The product of the week videos he put out are really high quality and really get into the key high-level points of what a thing is. I'm more of the vibes guy, and my vibe on this one is, yeah, this is really cool. So before I go off on my slightly vibes-based rant as to why I think this is cool, let's just talk about what it is. So the heart of it is an ESP32 S3, and you have a 1.28-inch TFT touchscreen on the front, based in a plastic case, which is a rotary encoder that you can turn around and, of course, press in. There's a few other goodies under the hood as well. There's NFC capabilities, there's a real-time clock plug-in that you can plug a battery into in order to have a real-time clock. There's also a battery management circuit as well, so you could run this thing off battery power as well if you would like to. A few other nice little touches is a little built-in buzzer, which could be used for giving very basic feedback, but if you really got into it, you could get some of that really nice haptic feedback going that you've seen in other builds that are similar to this. It won't be quite as nice as that smart knob that we featured a long time ago, but you could probably add some things to this to give it some real nice user feedback based on whatever code you put into it. And the other thing that's just small, but I think is a really nice detail here, is the input voltage is massive. It's from something like 6 to 36 volts. Yeah, I had to check that just to make sure I wasn't talking out of school. That's actually the input variant, 6 volts to 36 volts. And of course you can still power that using a normal battery. You can power it using USB as well. This is just other potential options, meaning you could slot this into a variety of systems that you already have going without having to worry about power requirements and stepping it down and all that kind of stuff. Finally, there are a couple of ports coming off it that allow you to do things with I2C or SPI or any other modules that you might want to attach to it. So yes, I think I've covered sort of the basic beans of what it is, but if you do really want to get into the thick of what makes this thing amazing and what you could use it for, I always suggest going and watching Robin's videos, as I mentioned at the start of this section. And yes, we are going to be giving this one away, but just before I announce the giveaway, this is the Ian vibes-based reason why I think this thing is cool, right? I am a maker with a lot of things to make stuff with, but very little time to do so. I talk about it on the show a lot, that I am a maker that doesn't really make much. I talk. In fact, my creativity is mostly just talking about making things rather than making them. I do my best to try and have a few small, achievable projects that I do at different times through the year, but realistically, as a freelancer with 2 children who is also a long-distance runner, the time I have is very slim. Because I have some really beautiful little bits of circuitry that allow you to run a microcontroller for a very long time off a battery. I have some really beautiful rotary encoders I've got that are lovely, clunky and mechanical, and I suppose I could set this thing to work with that and have buttons to switch exactly what it's switching up. I could even set a little screen on it. I have some really nice little round TFT displays that I bought on a whim a while ago. I've got a packet of 10 of them. Even putting all this stuff together to do a rough hardware test to see if it would work, and then slapping some example code together to see if it would get running, by the time I do that, I will have run out of time to work on that project for that day. Whereas an ESP32 development kit, which is almost reverse engineered to be a rotary encoder that you can switch up to do different things, means that, oh, if I want to do a turny-turny, pressy-pressy, I can just get this thing up and running with example code straight off the bat. Bearing in mind this thing costs about $35, that's not a high price to pay for such a specialized dev kit. You'll always be able to spool up your own thing for cheaper if you have the parts there and your time is not worth the money. But for me, it's not even just a question of my time being worth money, it's just I have so much little time in general that if I want to get something off the ground, having specialized tools like this that are affordable is absolutely wild. And that's why the M5 Dial is one of the ones that from the very time I saw it back in the day to it being now our product of the week, it's just an exciting thing and I kind of like it. That's the Ian vibes based way of talking about it. I know it's not very technical, but this is the way I sort of see things, and one of the reasons I love talking about stuff like this, because the utility of this stuff is based entirely on the kind of person it might be aimed at, and this is almost perfectly aimed at me. I can think of 1,000,001 things I could do with this thing, and when I get back, hopefully you'll see a few of those things show up on the Electromaker project page when I have my little interim of getting back to normal life. Now, it wouldn't be a product of the week without there being a giveaway, and this one is no different. Just a quick reminder for those of you who watched the last product of the week, that one is slightly different because the Star Note we're giving away at a slightly later date, just because we have some quite exciting Star Note content coming up that we're going to be giving that away with. So fear not, if you're after satellite comms, you'll be able to enter that competition soon. But if you would like to get your hands on an M5 Dial, all you need to do is head into the comments of the video that Robin made. It will be linked underneath this one, and look at the pinned comment there. It will tell you the hashtag M5 Stack that you need to leave there. You also need to leave what you would do if you won it. Now, what you would do with it is not how we're going to base choosing a winner. We choose our winners at random, so it is fair, but you do have to say what you would do with it, because that's my favorite thing about these competitions. All of your amazing and wild ideas for what you would do with this. Because sure, you could use it to turn your thermostat up and down. There's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a particularly nice idea for it. It's perfect for home automation because you can change the screen to 1,000,001 things, but do let me know what you would make with it. We will be picking that winner at random, and it will be announced in a couple of weeks on the show. All of these competitions are only open to people who are subscribed to the Electromaker YouTube channel, so before you do enter the competition, do make sure you have subscribed, and it can't hurt to like this video as well. Was that too cheesy? That was probably too cheesy. Embedded World 2025 is just around the corner. From the 11th to the 13th of March in Nuremberg in Germany, one of the biggest and best embedded conferences that you can find is happening. And now they have released their full program. Now, the full program is available on the Embedded World website, and of course you can find a link to that under this video. But some highlights include Altera CEO Sandra Rivera will be giving a talk on AI using FPGAs as opposed to mountains of GPUs. Again, there are far too many things to go through in this small section, so just a couple of highlights from day one that I saw. 1, a hands-on approach to using Docker for Linux as a way of doing your development. 2, an introduction to using Rust as an embedded systems language, which is becoming more prevalent thanks to the memory safety of the language. Getting started with I3C with a MIPI interface from the MIPI Alliance. Using the Zephyr RTOS for security-focused applications, getting started with RISC-V, and also a guide to Yocto, which is a highly customizable brand of Linux, which is designed pretty much on a purpose-for-purpose case. Or perhaps I should say a case-by-case basis. But that is just a few small things from day one, and I had to really cherry-pick even just out of those. The full program is now available, and there's a huge amount going on. As someone who's been to the conference a lot, I mostly end up just on the conference floor going around and talking to people, but there is a huge wealth of workshops and talks happening behind the scenes that if you know where they're happening and when, you can really pick up some information from the people who are writing the guides that you are going to be reading online or in the documentation later anyway. It's absolutely worth attending for this alone, and if you are interested in finding out more, head to the link in under this video and you can find the full program. There are still tickets widely available, and just a quick reminder, if you buy a ticket for the Nuremberg Messe, that is also your travel ticket in Nuremberg. It is a very beautiful city and one that is worth a visit. So, with all of that said, I hope to see you at Embedded World. I know that I will not be able to be there for the full conference this year just because my travel plans don't quite align, but I may be there for one of the days, and if so, I shall see if anyone from the Electromaker community has made it out there. There is a non-zero possibility of ducks and lake sounds in this section. It is time for Funding Website Things, and I was actually planning on making a much larger version of Funding Website Things in this episode, but we're not going to have time. So next week I'm going to make that probably a full show of Funding Website Things, but for this week there's just a couple of things I want to focus on. So the first thing I want to point out is on Crowd Supply is the Space Girl soldering kit, and this isn't something that's being funded or that is in pre-launch. This is something that was there a while ago, but it's just come back into stock. And I wanted to mention this for two reasons. One is it's a good reason to remind you that if you actually sign up for the Crowd Supply newsletter, they haven't asked me to say this or anything, but I find it really useful because I find out about stuff that was funded a long time ago that's just come back into stock through it, because they'll tell you when things come back into stock. And the Space Girl soldering kit is one of them. Secondly, I wanted to talk about MakerQueenAU because the Soldering Girl badge that I'm about to show you is one of several solder kits that she creates. Now, I think solder kits are amazing in general because they're an amazing way to learn to solder, and usually you end up with something functional and maybe useful, but they're not necessarily all that aesthetically pleasing. And while that shouldn't matter, it's also sometimes nice to make something that is nice, that just looks good after the fact, that you could wear on your clothes, and that is exactly what this is. And in fact, with the Space Girl soldering kit is what I'm talking about here, but this is really one of three. If you go and make a MakerQueenAU's Crowd Supply profile, you will see there are two others along with the Glow Stitch LED project, which we've mentioned before on the show. And all of them are just very lovely. They're very aesthetic and beautiful things. Each one of them has a video showing you how to assemble them. And you end up with something which is very simple to solder, a fantastic project for someone starting out, but also something that ends up as something you would want to wear. These things are aesthetically pretty in their own rights. I could imagine people buying them as gifts already assembled, because, you know, they're gloriously techy, but also very, very lovely looking. And there's two which are badges, if I'm thinking correctly. Yes, the Biology Girl badge is also one which is a badge when it is finished, in that it has a pin for attaching it to clothes and works with a coin cell battery. Once again, you get a full assembly video of it. And if I just jump towards the end here, you'll be able to see it in action and working. Add option screw fit. There we go. And this one might actually be my favorite. The cat lamp is incredibly cute. It's a little lamp, which, as you can see here, which lights up, which is just a little cat. It's very pretty, and they're soldering kits with a little bit of beauty to them. That isn't to say that there isn't the beauty in the function and form of some of the other ones that are available, and there are other kits like this, but I wanted to point this out just because it's just come back into stock, and it's something that I find quite awesome. It's something that I will be definitely getting my hands on for various people's kids as they get soldering iron eligible age. Oh, and in terms of the hardware behind it, it's all relatively simple stuff, but it's really quite nice. So for example, these have candle flicker yellow LEDs, so it has a bit of dynamism, is that the word I'm looking for? It's a bit dynamic without having to actually do any programming or add any kind of specifically different circuitry. The cat lamp soldering kit comes with a photoresistor, so it's a nightlight. It turns on when it gets dark. And the Space Girl soldering kit has color cycling LEDs. So once again, these are simple electronic circuits, but it's a fantastic way to learn about them and get something out of it at the end, which is quite nice. Now, MakerQueenAU is also Steph Piper, someone we talked about on the show before, because she is the creator of the Glow Stitch LEDs. These are machine sewable LEDs, which are unsurprisingly incredible for wearables. She's also written a book, and if you'd like to find out any more about either of these things, you can look in the description of this video, or you can go to makerqueen.com.au, which is her website. Next, we're going to talk about the RK3588 AI Module 7. Now, this is an AI module, as the name suggests, but it is a system-on-module in exactly the same form factor as the NVIDIA Jetson Nano. And if you own an NVIDIA Jetson Nano on one of their baseboards, you will find that this will slot in perfectly, allowing you immediately to start work with the RK3588 with all of the inputs, outputs, and peripherals that you are used to. So on the surface, there's not all that much to say about this in a way, because it is essentially just an upgrade on what you would get if you were to get something like a Jetson Orin Nano today. For me, if I was to get one of these, it would be a massive upgrade, because I have the original NVIDIA Jetson Nano, which was long before the Orin series, which is a much less powerful system on module. But if you already have an Orin, then the main differences you're going to find here is a lot more in the way of RAM and a much more powerful processor. There's even a very handy comparison chart here showing that this does pip the Orin Nano here, and of course it blows the Raspberry Pi 5 out of the water when it comes to certain things. The other difference here is that there's a variety of different OSs that it supports, but then you're not getting the specific NVIDIA Jetpack software suite, which, if you are familiar with it, is of course something that is quite easy to get started with. But if you are interested in finding out all of the details, do head to this page right here. They've already listed everything that it can do. In fact, the only thing that isn't here is its price, because this is a pre-launch project. So if you are interested in finding out more and finding out its price, you can click the subscribe button here. I think because I'm signed in to Crowd Supply, I just click subscribe and it will add my email to it. If you're not signed in, I believe there's a box here that you can type your email address into and get news just about this particular project. The Crowd Supply newsletter, by the way, is amazing. I would recommend it to absolutely anybody. But if you just want to find out about this kind of project, if you're working with AI, maybe if you have an NVIDIA baseboard lying around that you don't have anything to do with right now, this might be worth a look. And of course, the Rock chip, the RK3588, is a very popular chip. It's showing up in a lot of single board computers, but this particular edge connector system on module design is obviously very interesting to people who are working on very specific hardware, because you can use a baseboard to evaluate it and to work out exactly what you want to do with it before coming up with a custom baseboard or custom housing for it for whatever commercial or industrial use you have. It's also worth pointing out that ARM SOM, the company behind the AI Module 7, are putting out their own baseboard here, which is an upgraded version, again, of the NVIDIA Nano baseboard, the B01 baseboard, the developer kit B01. Sorry, I second-guessed myself there. It's the same idea as that, but with more peripherals, more ways of expanding it. It's got an M2 key slot and a couple of different display slots, a couple of things that the original other board was missing. But given that the main draw of this is the MPU on the RK3588, then this is something that obviously people are going to be interested in if they're working with AI tasks, especially if you're working with video, for example. This can decode 8K at up to 30 frames per second or something along those lines, if I remember correctly. It can encode 8K at 30 frames per second, and it can decode 8K at 60 frames per second if it is HVEC, or 30 frames per second if it is H.264. So yeah, there's a lot of different options there, especially if you're working with things like computer vision. As always, if you'd like to find out anything more about any of the things we talk about in Funding Website Things, it's always linked in the description. And Crowd Supply is just a great website to generally hang out on. It's a place where it feels like Kickstarter, but just for wild engineering stuff, some of which is very based in the industry and is obviously going to be used in that, and some of which is just wild and off the wall. The MTN Reform computers showed up on Crowd Supply, and things like the Arduino TV I haven't had a chance to talk about, which is basically adding an HDMI out to an original Arduino. It's wild, and we'll be talking about a lot more of this stuff in the coming weeks. That has been our show for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for your continued support. I have no idea how this show came together audio-wise, because it's been a bit of a challenge finding quiet enough places to record recently. However, I'm hoping that we have still managed to get everything across in a way that is decent. If you are someone who also listens to this as a podcast, I'd be very interested to hear what your experience of this has been. But yes, I will be back in the Attic of Dreams in just a week or so. So our normal show service will be resuming, along with a couple of new shows cropping up on the Electromaker YouTube channel in the coming weeks. I will let you know more about that when that is all finalized. But for now, thank you for your continued support. Thank you for those of you who are pressing like on YouTube, and a massive thank you to those of you who are shopping in our Electromaker store at electromaker.io/shop. For now, I wish you a safe, fun and creative week, and I wish you the best, and I hope you've enjoyed the leg sounds as much as I have. And we'll be looking into it, how much of an upgrade it is, and of course whether it's still... Oh, hello there. Hey, how's it going, guys? How's it going? Oh, guys. Dogs. What else? All right. Now those two are going that way. Are they going to jump back in? Or is he just going to drive back down again? I'm not going to turn the camera around and show you, because I don't think he'd like it very much. But yeah, a very inventive way of walking dogs. The guy's just driven across this park in a 4x4. with his 3 dogs running alongside him. It's not the first time I've seen this. There's a guy in Bavaria who, near my father-in-law's house, drives his Mercedes very fast along a bit of country dirt road with fields on each side and just lets his racehound dog just run along by the side of the car. And then, yeah, comes back again. And he does that instead of walking his dog.